and more waiting, and now we're blinking. But before you start, we really should go back to our original comics numbering.
Help me out here, guy. What are you talking
about? You're live, Mike. Go for it.
Hey, folks. Thanks for tuning to the BAMF podcast. I'm your befuddled host, Mike Lafferty, and we're here today to talk about pop culture and comics and fun stuff like that. And to help us with that, we've got a couple of RPG luminaries from Greater Than Games. First off, we've got Chris Bedell. How you doing, Chris?
Good. I'm doing well. It's good to see you. I don't know that I'm an RPG luminary yet, though.
Aspiring, perhaps. Listeners might recognize the dulcet tones of Christopher's voice from when he was on previously to discuss Sentinels of the Multiverse, as he is one of the main guys behind that.
Yep.
So thanks for joining us, Chris. And also a guy who we think is returning, but honestly, it's been over 6 or 7 years ago since we interviewed people about Marvel Heroic Role-Playing, so we're not sure. Is Dave Chalker? How you doing, Dave?
I'm great. How are you?
All right. Could you give us a quick rundown of your resume just so our listeners know where you're coming from?
Sure. I am both a board game and RPG designer. On the board game side, I did games like Get Bit and Thief's Market, and on the RPG side, I was one of the lead developers on Marvel Role-Playing, as we talked about. I was in charge of the Annihilation books, which bummed me out because the book that we were just about to publish before the license was pulled was the Guardians of the Galaxy one before the movie hit it big.
Yeah, I was a freelancer on that project, so I feel your pain completely.
Yep. Yeah, I oversaw those. And,
Dave, before I forget to mention this, I've been talking to Dan Abnett, and we're trying to get him on the podcast in a couple of weeks. Would you want to talk to Dan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right now we're aiming for the 21st. But I'll loop you into that email chain, and we'll try to make that happen. Because I know Cam had mentioned wanting to, talk to him. And I figured since you're the guy, heading up the Annihilation book, that might be cool for you too. So, all right, cool. We'll hopefully that'll work out then. So we've got you guys here today to talk about Sentinels of the Multiverse RPG. And what can you tell us about that?
Sure. So the Sentinel Comics RPG is it will be coming out like next year, but before that, we're later this year putting out a starter kit for the Sentinel Comics RPG. Because a couple of years ago now, this has been a project we've been working on for a long time. We started working on this an RPG, and by we, I mean the fine folks at Critical Hit Studio, which is Dave, who is the president of Critical Hits. He's not actually Greater Than Games; he's his own company. Then he's got this was kind of brought up by a mutual friend and RPG luminary, Cam Banks, who kind of was the impetus behind making all this go. And then they also brought on Philippe Menard to make everything happen. But anyway, so we started working on this a few years ago. And we announced earlier, I think we announced the starter kit earlier this year. Maybe we announced it in last year. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong here. It's been a lot of time. Mm-hmm. But we're going to have the starter kit that comes out shortly after Gen Con this year. And but we'll have it to preview at Gen Con, and we'll also have it to pre-order at Gen Con. And that's just going to show you how the system works and take you to some adventures and introduce you to a bunch of characters. And it's its own system. It's not a system that is built around anything else. It's not a setting book. It's a system book. It's a lot of fun. Very high action, high thematic storytelling RPG system.
What can you tell us about the system?
Everything. What do you want to know about this system?
Does it involve dice, or is task resolution handled via cards or coins or I ching sticks? How do you
rock, paper, scissors? We have not seen that yet, I don't think.
No, that's a LARP thing.
It's handled. Oh yeah. It's handled via argument, and whoever argues the loudest wins. That's what happens.
Nice.
Yeah. We figured we wanted to really tap into the comic nerd culture and just really lean into that. Nope, it's a dice-based system. It is in fact a dice pool system in which whenever you do anything, every character has a list of powers that are your superpowers and a list of qualities that are like who you are as a person, as a hero, and then your status, which is based both on your health and also what's going on in the scene. And you get a die from your powers, like I'm going to take the power of strength, because I'm going to punch through this wall. So I'm taking a strength power, which is a D10, and I'm going to take my leadership quality because I'm leading the charge through this wall, and then let's say that's a D8. And then my status, I'm in the green zone because the system is called the gyro system. It's green, yellow, red, out, GYRO, gyro system. And if I'm in the green zone, it's the beginning of the scene. Nothing really negative or impactful has happened yet. So my status die at that point, depending on the sort of character I am. But for this one, it's a D6. So I've got a D6 for my status, a D10 for my power, which was strength, and a D8 for my quality, which is leadership. I roll all three of those, and I take the mid-rolling die as my result, unless I have some sort of ability that says to do otherwise.
Would I be a huge asshole if I had noticed some similarity to Marvel role-playing?
That would not be out of place at all.
Okay.
So I can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
So Cam, obviously, he was working on this and was the lead designer on Marvel. We got together and we had originally pitched the project actually as another Cortex project, but it became pretty clear for a number of reasons that Sentinels really wanted to be its own system. But what we did was, with any of these licensed products like Marvel or when we worked on Firefly or other ones, you distill the system down to emphasize the things that property is really good at. And so, we built out Sentinels, around the kind of core cast of superhero characters. At the same time, we wanted to take a lot of the stuff we really liked about Marvel and, keep some of the basic things like the stats being dice and a range, so it's not, a static score, which, I prefer for superhero type stuff, and kind of build on it and also make it its own thing at the same time.
So in your playtests, how has the dice mechanic been flowing? Does it keep the action moving, or does mixing the dice and the conditions do anything to slow it down? Like, how do you keep that intense pace that you see from panel to panel?
So I've found that it is really great because it every time you can't ever just say, well, okay, I swing my sword at it. You are always building that dice pool, and so you're always using a word describing how you're doing in the moment, your status, a word describing the power that you are using, and a word describing the quality that you're using. And so even people that are more role-play adverse are naturally using more descriptive words and describing their actions in a more interesting way. I found that it hits people that are more role-playing adverse to actually do role-playing. For people that are into role-playing, the system's got a lot for them to chew on. And for people that just want to fight and beat things up, they can figure out, what their optimal power, quality, ability setup is to do that. So I've, for the most part, had people really enjoy the system. I don't know that I've had any standout negative comments other than, I don't know, it's not for me. I'm not rolling any D20s because it's a D4 through D12 system. So no D20s. So if that's a deal breaker for you, understandable.
So the conditions, does each character have a set of conditions, or is there like a generic pool that says like charge that's a D6 and anyone can use that, or is it every character got their own little sets?
Every character has their own list of powers, their own list of qualities, and then your status is green, yellow, red, out. So that's the same across the board. But your powers and your qualities are unique to you. In the process of character creation, if you're playing one of the pre-generated characters, one of the canonical Sentinels comics characters, then that's already going to be pre-generated, pre-written in the book. But if you're making a new character, the character creation process walks you through the process of picking your backstory, and then your backstory informs what qualities you have, and you pick your power source, and that informs what powers you have, and then you go on to your archetype, and that does a little bit of both and gives you a bunch of abilities, and then you finish up with your personality, and so all those things kind of fit together to make your character. And so each character really is going to have a unique set of both your powers and your qualities, but also your ability set up. And abilities is where the powers and qualities and that dice pool really shines, because instead of just, okay, I'm going to roll the 3 dice, take the middle result, and punch somebody with that, you might have an ability that says, okay, you roll the 3 dice, you punch a bunch of people with your min die, the lowest rolling of the 3 dice, and then your max die, you hinder one of them. So you like knock a bunch of people, you punch a bunch of people, and one of them you specifically knock down or something. And so because there's attacking, which is dealing damage. There's overcome checks, which is like kind of any sort of skill check. You're trying to do a thing that isn't specifically dealing damage. That's overcome. And you have boosting and hindering, which are opposites of each other. Where boosting is you're boosting somebody up, and hindering you're like it's some sort of hex or tying them up or something like that. And then defend is your last action. That's just if you're trying to prevent damage. So those are kind of encapsulate everything you're doing, and you use your powers and your qualities and all of your abilities to make that happen. So.
Okay, so that sounds cool, because just saying that, I just thought you just said you inflict more damage to one and less to a group. My thing would be, okay, I pick that one guy up and I swing him at all the other guys, and everyone else takes damage, and the main guy takes all the damage from all the other guys.
That is an ability in there.
That's really cool, yeah.
Yeah, totally doable.
That's like my favorite meme where it says, "I just want to hit a dude with another dude." That's yeah, that's pretty cool. Yep. So what's during all this playtest, what's the craziest dice pool that you've seen put together? Like, combination of scene, action, dice. What stands out at you in one of these playtests?
Dave, do you have any that jump out at you?
It tends not to be the dice pool specifically, but I have seen somebody who was playing Unity, who's the electrokinetic robot builder, and in the card game, she's got her army of raptor bots and everything.
She makes robots with her brain.
All the robot golems, yeah.
Yep. So in one game, she managed to reprogram an ice cream machine to be the most deadly combat robot you've ever seen.
As you would,
And it did cold damage, so, that was extra fun.
Naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So there were people knocked down by brain freeze?
Pretty much.
That is amazing. Did somebody illustrate this? Because this sounds like it would be a fun comic.
I haven't had anybody do any art of their playtest yet, but I'm certain it will happen at some point. I'm excited to get this out to people and see what encounters people have on their own.
So if people want to pre-order the starter kit, can they do that?
Yeah. So not yet. We haven't put it up yet, but soon we will have it. We'll have it up at greaterthangames.com, and then we'll have it lots of other places as well. But that'll be where it's available first. So.
Okay. And what's the time frame on that?
So our goal, we were going to have it at Gen Con, and things take so long with RPGs, it just is not happening. So it's going to be like around the end of August, but we'll have it for sale at Gen Con for pre-order, and so around then is when it would also go up on the website.
Okay, cool. So Gen Con being late August, right?
It's like mid-August, so yeah, it would probably be around a month from now that it goes up for pre-order. But I'm not saying it's going to go up on August 6th. When it's up on August 6th, I get angry emails saying, "You said I didn't say that."
Well, I'll tell you, if they want to keep up to date on what's happening with Greater Than Games and Sentinels of the Multiverse, they just go to greaterthangames.com, your website, or should they go to Chris's company's website? How would they keep up to, why would they find out when it comes out?
Your best bet is to go to greaterthangames.com. If you're on Twitter, you can follow us at GT Games LLC. But yeah, greaterthangames.com has a lot of stuff, and right now there's not a lot up about the starter kit yet because we're about to start revealing a bunch of information about it. So we're fixing to start up that process right now. So good timing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and well, I remember reading the initial press release, and it just mentioned a large number of booklets.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Yes.
Oh my gosh, the starter kit comes with so much because we're like, we're going to make a starter kit, but we want to put a lot in it and make sure that everybody's very happy with what they're getting. So for $20, you get 13 booklets. One booklet is the biggest of them all. It's the gameplay guide, and it's like a core rule book. It's not a full-size core rule book. It's 20 pages? I don't know. It's some number of pages. Actually, I think it is. It's like 24 pages, 24 sheets. So anyway, it has the first half of it is how to play the game as a player, and then there's like a middle spread of here's a bunch of useful information, and then the second half of it is all how to GM the Sentinel Comics RPG. So that it both kind of holds your hand through as a first-time player, but also as a first-time GM. And even accomplished GMs will, more accomplished, more veteran GMs will be able to go through there and figure out, okay, these are the rules and things we need. But if you're a first-time GM, the book is going to be able to also walk you through that process. So that's super cool. And that's the one big booklet. Then there are 6 booklets about characters, 6 booklets for players, and 6 booklets for the GM. The booklets for players are 6 character booklets that are essentially the character sheet for a different member, for each member of the Freedom 5, plus the character Unity that Dave mentioned, who makes robots with their brain. She was the former intern of the Freedom 5, but now she's moving on to a new career path within the pages of Sentinel Comics. And so each of them, it's a booklet that has the character sheet in it, but the pages on either side of the character sheet are numbered that show like how everything works, from as much as like this is a picture of your hero, this is the name of your hero, down to these are principles and this is how we use them. These are hero points and here's what that means. Here's your powers, here's your qualities, here's your status, here's your abilities, and all of that really explained in long form, so that when you're looking at your character sheet, you're like, what does this do? There's an answer right to your left or to your right, depending on where you are on the character sheet.
Okay, so it sounds like you're trying to sort of smooth the introduction, make it easier for, new first-time players or maybe people who are new to the system to pick it up and just go, because you got your cliff notes with your character sheet right there.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to make sure that, if you've never played an RPG before, you could sit down, pick this up, and you might feel like, wow, there's a lot of information here, but every single piece of that information has sentences about what it means and how it works. And so there's those 6, the Legacy, Bunker, Tachyon, the Wraith, and Absolute Zero, and then they're entering Unity as the 6 character booklets there.
Okay, all right.
And then the other 6 booklets are 6 adventures. One of the things that that is true about the Sentinel Comics RPG is that it's not just a comic book. Rather, it's not just a superhero RPG. It is a comic book RPG. It is about being characters in a comic book. And so with that, whenever you play a game of the Sentinel Comics RPG, you record that on your character sheet as an issue that you've played.
A back issue.
A back issue, in fact, because it's part of your past. And whenever you collect 6 back issues, you remove those from your back issue section of your character sheet and move them to your collection, which is where you write in they're essentially collected trades of here's 6 issues that we've collected together, and that has a mechanical effect in the game that essentially is a way for character advancement to not be based on how much damage you did or how many people you beat up or whatever. It's about how much story you've experienced, how much what your history as a comic book character is like. And so with that in mind, we've included 6 issues, so you can play through 6 issues, record each of them as a back issue, and when you've played through all 6 issues, you get to move that over as a collection and see how that works. And each of those issues, it's fun because it's a great series of adventures that we've all worked on for a long time and come up with this cool arcing path that goes together. Additionally, they tell the gap between the Sentinels the Multiverse card game and the Sentinel Comics role-playing game. Because the Sentinel Comics role-playing game and the Sentinels the Multiverse card game are not this. They don't overlap. They're not the same timeline. They're not taking up the same space. The Sentinels the Multiverse card game ends with the product Oblivion that's coming out into this year, and the Sentinel Comics RPG picks up where that left off, but a few months later, maybe half a year to a year later, there's that gap in between. And so the starter kit specifically tells the story of what's going on between the end of the card game and the proper beginning of the RPG. And then when the core book and all of the RPG stuff comes out, it will all pick up essentially there at the end of right after the end of the starter kit. And so people that are really people that don't know anything about Sentinels the Multiverse or Sentinel Comics, no worries. This is all going to be easy to follow and you'll recognize what's going on. No problem. But if you're a person who's into the lore of Sentinel Comics and you like the characters and you want to know what's going on with the story, this is a great thing to take you through that whole story process and move you on into the future of these fictional comic books.
Wow. Okay. So that's a whole lot of metaplot going on.
Yeah. Yes.
That's definitely a pretty cool mechanic. Do you have rules in there to also like mechanical advantages or disadvantages that come when you have like a crappy writer or a crappy GM like you have in comics? Like that time that Captain America was turned into a werewolf, Thor became a frog, or any of that, or any time Abe mentions Deadpool.
Thor becoming a frog was not a crappy ride. That was cool.
So I guess the easy there's not a specific mechanic about like, oh man, this writer slash GM is crappy, what do we do? But that is kind of what you can use your collected trades for. That when you are in a situation in an issue, when you're playing through an issue of the RPG, and you want to invoke one of your collections, you can check off one of your collections to maximize a die in a die pool, or to create a bit of story canon, to add a bit to the story and be like, hey, here's this thing that's happening, and that relates to this thing that happened in this other issue, and therefore I'm actually going to create a bit of canon for the adventure here. And of course the GM can be like, no, that definitely, you can't say you accidentally had a pocket of 600 swords, like that's not a thing. But you can, as long as it fits in with the story, that works out. And so it's a way that you can kind of add to the story. The players have a lot of ways between their principles that I mentioned earlier and the twists that they're going to invoke as they play games, and also the usage of their collections. They have a lot of ways to influence the story themselves. It's not just fully a GM told story. So.
That's pretty neat. So, like, if we wanted to have like a BAMF collection or a BAMF trade, we could have the time that Mike became the Colorado salsa dance champion, or that time that Aid woke up in a nightmare and he was actually Gwenpool. So we could pull from all that to influence the die rolls.
Yes, absolutely.
It sounds like you can pull on your past history. Like, hey, remember that time when,
It's kind of like editor's notes. See issue blah 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 for this. But of course, those issues don't really exist, or you're filling in gaps. You can absolutely say, because I was the salsa dance champion of this issue, they were retconning in all of a sudden. Then you can get a bonus for that scene you're in, or just establish like, oh, the people at the door recognize you and let you in as a result. That kind of thing.
Right. I have to emphasize, I was only salsa dance champion of the Rocky Mountain area in the Husky Caucasian division. The Salsa Congress of the U.S. has stipulated that I have to say that whenever I talk about this in public.
It never gets old. It really
Sorry, I just want to put that out there.
Yeah,
I really want to call this the long box experience system. I know you guys aren't calling it that, but it's a really cool way to reach back and have your past adventures have some retcon / mechanical bearing on the game you're doing today. It's we'll look forward to seeing this.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And another thing that I don't know that we publicly revealed, but I'm willing to say it here because it's true and it's a thing that I want people to know and it's really cool, is that the 6 issues that come in the starter kit you don't have to play them all in the exact 6-issue order. Essentially, the first one is the issue 1, and the second one is issue 2, and the last one is issue 6. But then issues 3, 4, and 5, you get to the point at the end of issue 2, and it says, hey, now you can go any number of these places. You've got these 3 main things that you have to deal with. Which one do you want to go to next? And so the players will choose, okay, we want to go here, and the GM grabs that issue, and they can be played out of order, or rather, they can't be played out of order because the order is up to the players. And so I'm excited to hear from different groups of people that play through it how the different path they take influences what happens through the story and what happens at the end. Because even though, like, yes, this whole adventure is pre-written and it pre-exists, the way that you play through it is going to change the story as you do it. So it's one thing I'm really excited to hear from people who pick it up and play it, what they experience.
So if Marvel were bringing those out, that would be issue 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 released within a week of each other. So you have to buy 3 issues within the same month. So you definitely are fulfilling your comic-alike ability. It's very, very cool.
Yep. And that's what it is. The 3, the issue 1 and 2 and 6 are Freedom 5 801, Freedom 5 802, and Freedom 5 803. But at the end of 802, you have to stop and go off and read a Prime Warden's book, and a Justice Comics book, and
nice.
a Bizarre book before you can pick up on the 3rd issue, because something else is happening in between, and you won't know what happens if you don't. So,
that's very cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
Now, do you have further issues planned out for when the game proper drops?
So when the game itself comes out, we don't have a significant. We're not like, oh, it's coming out with the core rulebook and also with like 600 issues worth of content, because we want people. That's the RPG is for people to make up their own stuff. But we do have. So Adam, the artist for Sentinels, and myself, we started doing this in 2010, and we have infinite stories that we are constantly telling. Just to my right over here, which you can't see and I won't show you, there's a giant whiteboard that is covered in conspiracy theory style writing, and we have just like infinite stories that we're constantly telling. And the thing that the two of us want to get to is get to a point where we have created all the things and the game is out there, and then he and I can kind of take a step back and just focus on taking a lot of these stories that we want to tell and turning them into issues that people can play. So initially there will be some content that comes out around the same time as the game, the stuff that you can right off the bat pick up and play, but we have plans to make tons more because those ideas have been rattling around for years, and we're excited to get them onto paper finally. And this is a great way to do it too. People have wanted for a long time for us to make comic books that relate to the game, and like that's all fine and good, but we want something that people like play and interact with more. So this is a really fun way to do that. Of like, we'll make a series of comic books that you play through and decide how they go.
And
sorry, Dave.
just to tease something here, while still being vague, we want to have some people writing adventures for the game that you probably have heard of, but will probably depend on a Kickstarter results and all that kind of thing. But so keep an eye out for that.
So is this where we just announced there's going to be there's going to be a Kickstarter for Sentinels RPG?
Yeah, there is. I mean, this is the plan is that we do the starter kit, and then after the starter kit's fully out there in people's hands, we will do the Kickstarter for the core book and for some compendiums and other things as well that we'll see when that goes live. And so that will either be very end of this year or very beginning of next year. That is when that'll go live. So.
Okay. End of the year can be a rough time for Kickstarters.
Yeah, that's why we're probably going to push it on to the beginning of next year.
Okay. All right. Just thought I'd put that out there.
Yeah.
I learned it the hard way. So.
No, we've run a couple of Kickstarters.
Oh, cool. Well, I just got so many questions I could just rattle them off forever. But yeah, you are correct. I mean, I'm sure you know how large and excited your fan base is. I mean, just checking your own forums or going to Reddit, there's tons of dudes who are hardcore into the, and not just your games, but the, the meta plot behind your games. And I could see you guys putting out, short stories, novels, comic books if you wanted to, deal with all the hassle involved in making a comic book. So you've got to, I'll be excited to see where you guys go in, upcoming years.
Underoos.
Yeah, no, we've
just putting that out there.
Yeah, on that kind of note, I think I mentioned this when I was on last time we were talking about Sentinels the Multiverse instead of the Sentinel Comics RPG. That Adam and I at the beginning of this year started a podcast that is just the story. It's not about game stuff. It's not about mechanics. It's just telling the story of the multiverse. It's called the Letters Page because we answer letters from listeners as very much like the letters page in the back of a comic book. And we've been going through, and we do about a 90-minute episode every week since the middle of January, and it's still going strong, and it's got a lot of listeners who are very into just the story parts of it, and it's like, wow, okay, that's cool. This is mostly for us, so I'm glad that other people are into it.
And if they want to find that, that's on iTunes, I'm guessing?
Yeah, you can find it on iTunes and any other number of podcast things. The best way to get to it easily is greaterthangames.com/letters page. Is it /letters page or /the letters page? I think both work. But anyway, just type it in right now, like a professional. Yep, greaterthangames.com/letters page will take you to our website where we just posted our 25th episode on this last Tuesday about Chrono Ranger. And yeah, it's pretty good. I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying making it a lot because it's been fun to go back through all those stories that we started telling 7 years ago. So.
Oh, cool. Well, hey, we used to try to mix up the podcast with some conversation of games and pop culture. And before we got started, we were talking about what people have been reading and watching lately. And Dave, you mentioned you recently saw Baby Driver.
I did, and it is amazing. I love Edgar Wright, who did Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and World's End as part of a loosely connected trilogy.
And almost did Ant-Man.
Almost did Ant-Man. I'm sure his fingerprints were still on it. And also did Scott Pilgrim, which is one of my favorite movies. and this is kind of his first like full original his work, and it's it's definitely like a crime heist movie with a very strong soundtrack, but I kind of don't want to go too deep beyond that. So if like music plus crime story plus car chases appeals to you in any shade of that, I'd recommend going checking it out.
The press I've heard for that on NPR, they had I think they had the director, and he was actually he did research by actually talking to this guy who was a getaway driver.
Mm-hmm.
And they wound up working some of his stories into the movie, and they're having this exchange about all right, so what kind of music would you listen to when you're getting ready, going to or coming from a job? And he was like, well, I couldn't listen to music going to a job because I was just way too hyped. But I thought a lot about what music I wanted to listen to as I was leaving a job. And the first song I ever listened to when I was leaving a job was "Smooth Criminal" by Michael Jackson. And everyone started laughing. I'm like, yeah, I know that was just way too cliche. So after that, I felt kind of weird about that. So I just started listening to Pink Floyd after a gig just to relax. And it was just kind of cool hearing that guy's backstory. But the reviews I've been seeing for this movie, because I was prepared to write it off because it's got a really stupid title.
Yeah,
but that's probably just me being shallow. Because from what you're saying, this is really an amazing action movie.
I think the title's going to hurt it, even though it does make sense in context. But it sounds like the sequel to Boss Baby or something.
Yeah, that's
exactly
what I thought.
Yeah.
Pixar movie with a small child in the driving seat.
Yep. It is none of that. It is great.
I was uncertain on it, but I was like, well, it's an Edgar Wright movie. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm excited to see it. But the trailer that I saw for it, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, it's what I want it to be, not what I was afraid it would be.
How are the driving scenes in it?
So they're all practical effects, no real CGI, and I think that really shines through. It's really well done. And of course, it's all like soundtrack synced too, because it's a major part of the movie, and this just adds this like extra layer to it.
Now, did you drive like a maniac on the way home from the theater?
Not any more or less than I always do.
I got you. Yeah. Right on. If people wanted to compare it to things in they've already seen, what would be a good comparison so that they could gauge it?
It really does have that crime movie overtone. So especially if you like if you like Edgar Wright, if you like Shaun of the Dead, and a lot of his movies where like everything that gets set up pays off later. I think that's one part of it. It's not really anything like Fast and Furious movies, but there's certainly some similarities, just in some of the stuff that's happening. But it's also, I don't want to say part musical, but if you really enjoy music, that's layered in there.
From what I understand, Dave, tell me if this is wrong, it's not a musical, but the music is an important element of the movie.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to go too much into it because I really do think it spoils it at a certain level. It's just one of those movies that you kind of have to experience how they did it. But it's super well done.
I'm excited to see it.
I think we have wrung all the information out of Dave that he wants to give us about Baby Driver. Anyone else reading anything interesting, watching anything interesting these days?
Well, if nobody else is going to go, Secret Weapons from Valiant. Holy crap! Have you guys seen this?
I haven't even heard of it. What are you talking about?
Valiant Comics is basically they go in like stages, and they only produce a certain amount of books at a time, but every once in a while they'll produce like a crossover where you don't have to buy 90 different issues. It's just a self-contained little short story where a bunch of people come in. So in the Valiant universe, the kind of like the Magneto character, the one that believes he has everybody's best interest in heart, and uses his incredible powers to kind of push his own agenda, is this guy named Toyo Harada. And we've seen Harada has now fallen, and this group comprised of like the United Nations, MI6, all these different groups get together, and they send in a technopath, this lady named Livewire, to investigate some of the things he had going on, and how superhumans in Valiant Comics are called psiots. So Harada has been experimenting with augmenting psiots, and they send her in to go get it. But the guy who wrote the issue is the same person who wrote the movie Arrival. So it's a lot of character development, a lot of insight. Really interesting first issue. So I highly recommend people go pick it up.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, the one thing I like about the Valiant universe versus what the other big comic companies do is that, you know how you were talking earlier with the Sentinels RPG, you have this big back catalog that you can pull from and have mechanical effect. Whereas if you have something like Marvel or DC, oh my God, Gotham City's been destroyed, and then the next issue they're having ice cream in the same city block that's been destroyed a week earlier. You know, same thing with Marvel. How many times has New York been crushed? You know, the Mole Man comes up and basically upends Central Park, but then in an issue that supposedly takes place a week later, Central Park is fine. But like in the Valiant Comics universe, 2 years ago, I believe it was, during the Armory Wars, excuse me, crossover event, Mexico City was destroyed. And 2 years later in the comics, they're still dealing with the after effects of that. So that's what I really like about their comics. You know, everything leads into everything else, and it's not so everything has to be reset week to week to week to tell good stories.
You know, in Marvel's defense, Damage Control does very good work. So
right on.
Let's say if Invincible does that as well, that's pretty cool. Like, because obviously that's only generally the one core book. They can have that continuity between issues and stuff like that. And funny enough, they were just talking about this for Secret Empire. All these heroes have apparently turned bad, and the idea that like the teachers of the new Marvel universe are telling all their kids about Hydra being the best people in the world. That stuff should last after the crossover, unless it's all wiped away by a cosmic cube. That's the stuff that should last. So, yeah, the consistency needs to be there.
Now, how do you guys deal with the consistency like that in the RPG? Is it on the GMs to kind of do that, or do you actually deal with that when talking about, you know, the long box system that Mike was talking about?
Sure. Well, I mean, it depends on your home game, because like for us, we're never gonna, like, Adam and I aren't going door to door to people's houses and be like, hold on, you're playing Legacy wrong. Like, once you have the characters and you're doing the thing in your home game with it, it's up to you how hard and fast you want to play with things. You want to say, you know, 1 week you can destroy Megalopolis, and the next week it's fine, or do you want to like have a world that has impacts? Like that's mostly up to the GMs and the players. We put in a lot of information about places in the multiverse, or rather in the pages of Sentinel Comics now, since the multiverse ends with the card game. We have a lot of tools for you to kind of get into it as much as you want, or if you're like, you know what, I want to have this be a fast and loose sort of thing, that's up to you. So we want to give people a lot of options, but then not police the way they use those options.
So you do realize you could put the door-to-door option as a Kickstarter stretch goal, so that you could just basically fly out to all the people's games across the world, just police them, make sure everything's been okay. Yeah.
That is brilliant. I'll support that pledge.
$5,000 to get yelled
exactly,
at.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's acceptable. Yeah, travel on board, and then we come and look at your game, make sure everyone's okay. Off to the next place.
Yeah, for a certain amount of money, we continuity edit your game, your home game.
For $5,000, I'll come to your game and scratch my chin and say, "Well, actually."
Right.
I will say, so one of the Freedom 5 characters is Absolute Zero, who's got cold powers and all that, and I've run playtests where people wanted to go full Arnold Schwarzenegger and make cold puns all the time, and I've run games where people wanted to use Absolute Zero, who really wants to avoid cold puns but keeps making them accidentally and gets really mad at himself after he does, and some where he just skates by that altogether.
Yeah, no, it's
many different ways to play the character.
It is a challenge every time I am writing lines for Absolute Zero to not just write cold puns all the time.
The pun is a harsh mistress. She calls to you, but the wise man must know when to restrain himself. You know.
Is that from a fortune cookie?
Yeah, I get most of my stuff from fortune cookies. Hey, speaking of cool writing, there was this, and I hate to say this because I hate multi-crossover events, but over in the Star Wars comics, they just did a crossover event. I think Kieran Gillen, if you're familiar with I know him best from Young Avengers, but a couple years back, but he's done a bunch of stuff. He did this event called the Screaming Citadel, which can be loosely summed up as Luke Skywalker goes to Ravenloft.
Okay.
And it's actually, I keep, whenever I talk about Star Wars books from Marvel, I'm always saying it's not bad, because I'm always faintly surprised when a Star Wars comic isn't bad. But the characterization is, for the most part, spot on. There's a few bits where, Gillen's character, Dr. Aphra, has a lot of fun at Luke Skywalker's expense that you probably wouldn't ever see in a Lucasfilm product. But and it's a cool take on space vampires, and they do some fun things, in the universe. You've got a criminal Wookiee, you've got a couple of murderous droids, and I think I already said space vampires. So if you get a chance to check that out, you can still get the individual issues up on Comixology, and I'm sure the trade will be coming out soon. So
yeah, I loved his Darth Vader run. Like, that was one of my favorite. Said start point, end point, everything pays off. Really solid Star Wars stories. Oh yeah, definitely. They've done some amazing stuff, specifically with Darth Vader, that kind of sort of fleshes out and the emotional backstory between the prequels and the original trilogy. Can't recommend that highly, and I think Walt and I talked about that at length before. So yeah, it's been good stuff.
Yeah, the Dr. Aphra character has been a lot of fun. I mean, she's just the take on a murderous Indiana Jones with her two murderous droids is just phenomenal. But
just to be technical, if you look at the body count in any of those Indiana Jones movies, murderous Indiana Jones is kind of redundant.
It's true, but I just loved her signature line in the her first appearance, when she's basically trying to steal this artifact style weapon, and she's screaming at the top of her lungs, "This belongs in an armory!" It was just it was very, very geeky, very fun. But yes, that series has been so far, the Screaming Citadel has been very cool. For those who haven't read it, please, spoilers. But Mike, what did you think of when they try and use the rage-inducing spores, quote unquote, on Black Karsten?
That's the Wookiee, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of just turns into a carnage machine, and they
yes.
Yeah. It was that was definitely a crowd pleasing scene. I like that. Oh, you know what else has been good lately? Speaking of Dan Abnett, Aquaman.
Yes. So good.
Story arc, and Aquaman gets deposed. They try to assassinate him. He goes into hiding, and in the latest issue, 25, he basically becomes Batman in Atlantis, hanging out in the shadowy lower levels of the city, keeping the citizens safe from criminals and generally causing problems for the powers that be. It sounds cheesy, I know, but Abnett has a really deft touch, and it's the most fun I've had reading an Aquaman book probably ever. So if you haven't checked it out yet, issue 25 is a great place to jump on. So anyway, that's what I got. Hey, come to think of it, who's the Aquaman in the Sentinels multiverse? Is it Tempest?
Yeah, Tempest is going to be your closest bet for that.
Okay.
It depends on what aspect of Aquaman you're talking about. But if you're talking about like power set stuff, then Tempest is what you want.
I always think of him as more of a Thor, just Caval of Lightning. But I mean, he's kind of the only aquatic character. So yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. Okay. Well, hey, we're coming up on the 60-minute mark. Anything else we want to chew over before we wrap it up, fellas?
Killjoys is on again on Sci-Fi, and I didn't get paid to say that, so it's fine.
Killjoys is a fun sci-fi show. I appreciate you turning me on to it.
Yeah, that's if you like that one too. Another one you might want to check out is it's based off of a Dark Horse comic miniseries. It's called Dark Matter. It's about 8 criminals that wake up on a spaceship with no memory, and basically have to try and figure out what the hell is going on. And it's funny because the ship is called the Tabula Rasa. So it's really, really interesting show. They're doing season 3 now. In season 2, you find out a whole bunch of backstory on a bunch of the characters, and they're really not who you think they are. Yeah, and then the fun part is some of them are who you think they are. So I mean, it's if you like Killjoys, another one to check out that you can also catch on Netflix is Dark Matter.
Yeah, thanks for the recommendation. I wasn't sure about that because it kind of had a very sci-fi network look, if you know what I mean.
That you get over that, like every alien world looks like Canada. You kind of get over that in right around the 3rd episode. Then they start diversifying it up. One of my favorite characters on the whole show, though, is the android. It's just the actress's portrayal is fantastic, and in the 2nd season, it becomes even more so. So if you haven't caught it, blunder through the first 3 episodes. After that, it gets a lot better, and a lot of these story elements start coalescing. It's definitely a fun ride.
All right, cool. Anything anyone else wants to recommend or geek out about before we wrap things up?
I've just got the Doom Patrol Silver Age Omnibus, which is spectacular.
Cool. Yeah, so they're going to go on sale.
Very good. Yes, 1,077 pages, and it's about 3 inches thick. So you could beat animals to death with it if you really wanted to. If you're ever attacked by any bears or anything while you're out there in the woods, just wield it like a mallet. It'd be fine.
The BAMF podcast does not endorse beating animals to death with trade paperbacks.
But every Doom Patrol issue from the original run. So My Greatest Adventure, right up to the Island Death, and a Challengers crossover and a Flash crossover. So very cool. And interesting enough, as you kind of read through it, the parallels to the X-Men comics at a very, very similar time are very, very apparent. It's quite surprising. It's like, hey, they all died on an island. Didn't the original X-Men go near an island at one point? Yeah, it's quite cool. So yeah, good stuff.
Okay, cool. Chris, anything?
No, unfortunately, I don't get much spare time. I'm mostly just writing things.
Okay, so you do game development full time, right?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, we were actually talking off the air before we started about the fact that there's 10 of us full time here at the Greater Than Games headquarters now. So,
holy wow, you guys might be larger than just about every RPG company I know of, except maybe Hasbro.
I mean, there's a few that are bigger than us. We're not as big as Hasbro. We're not as big as Paizo. I don't even know that we're big as John Wick Presents, but
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, it's hey, just out of curiosity, I mean, I know you guys are big in board games and card games. We're kind of looking at the RPGs as sort of a labor of love. I'm just saying this because there's a story on Ian World earlier, I think today, talking about the size of the RPG market compared to the rest of the hobby games market, and it was sobering.
Yeah, no, I mean, we as a board game company, we're already used to being a niche market within the entertainment industry, and with the RPG market, we're excited to see who this game is for. We know it's for us, that's why we're making it. It's because we love it and we want to play it. And we also know that there are people out there who will like an RPG like this, and we're excited to get it to them. So.
Okay, cool. I'm guessing you guys already get a lot of cheesy jokes from fans at conventions about whenever we've seen the MMO and stuff like that, right?
I don't know that I ever want to do an MMO. I could see doing a video game of some sort, but an MMO, I don't know.
Since City of Heroes went away, there's a big gap to fill.
There is, but I'm not sure if people are interested in a big game like that anymore as much. There was a time for it,
That's probably an astute observation, yeah. Dave, how about you? Anything else you want to mention or talk about before we wrap up?
Nope, just that a bunch of us will be at Gen Con demoing starter kit stuff and happy to answer more questions online, wherever, about upcoming RPG.
Okay, cool. Can we get you guys back on closer to the release date, maybe right before?
Yeah, I mean, sure. We can. We'll happy to come back whenever works for you guys. We'll have stuff about the starter kit and also, of course, stuff closer to the Kickstarter itself. So.
Okay. Do we have any? Oh, wait, we are talking about the Kickstarter release date still, TBD. So, all right.
Cool. Sometime probably Q1 2018.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
So hey, if folks wanted to jump on and listen to the letters page, should they start from number 1, or is there a good jumping on point?
I would highly recommend starting from number 1. That's just the best way to do it, is start number 1 and go through. I would say issue number 1. Episode number 1 is about Legacy, the all-American hero that kind of launches the whole thing, and then it goes through with like 1 or 2 episodes about a hero, and then an episode about a villain, and then another 1 or 2 episodes about a hero, and an episode about a villain. And I would just listen to them chronologically until you catch up. I think they're a pretty good listen, because I have to, after we record them, I have to listen to them all to write up the show notes. And man, I don't like listening to myself talk for 90 minutes, but they're still pretty entertaining to listen to. And informational.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, thanks again for coming out to talk to us. Always a pleasure to have you on. And listeners, thanks for listening. Check out our Patreon. If you go to Patreon and do a search for BAMF Podcast, you'll find us there. Tell your friends, tell your family. And once again, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the BAMF Podcast.